And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another despondent post-Wisconsin episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers once again go into Madison, go into the Kohl Center, and come out losers. The final score tonight, 71-61. The Badgers win after the Hoosiers held a lead for a good majority of the first half. Wisconsin just absolutely came out and decimated Indiana in the second half, just continued. They grabbed the lead early. They continued to extend it in the second half. And Indiana really didn't show up to fight and play and compete in the second half. And the result, again, was a 10-point loss in a game that coming into it, given the guys that Wisconsin lost off of last year's team, some of the losses they've taken this year, some of the injuries that they've had, it really looked like a win could be there for the taking of all the games over the last 2 decades to win. This felt like the one that it could be, and it looked like it might be going that way. And then we just saw the return of whatever it is in this group of Indiana players where they just kind of stopped playing. And I don't know what it is, but we're obviously going to try and break it down here on this episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips as we try to make sense of yet another Indiana loss to Wisconsin. But let's start tonight's show as we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. So we will find something positive, and then I'll move to the side, and Andy and Ryan can talk about some of the more negatives. But obviously, for the banner moment tonight, you have to go back to the first half. Really, the only thing that you could choose from the second half is probably Josh Newkirk's pass that got deflected and knocked into the basket by Ethan Happ, because that was probably the best offensive play Indiana had in the entire second half. But back in the first half, when Indiana was playing well, I know it feels like a long time ago, but Indiana actually had some good stretches in the first half. I thought for a decent amount of time, they're played pretty hard too. Like I thought Indiana really showed themselves well in the first half. And there was a stretch toward the end of the half. You know, Indiana was up 28-24. They'd been nursing a 3-4-5 point lead there for a while. And Collin Hartman went on a little 5-point streak. He made a 3 at the end of the shot clock that was a huge bucket. It put Indiana up 31-24, which I think was Indiana's biggest lead of the game. And that had been a really bad possession up until that point. And Collin kind of bailed him out, knocked down that 3. On the next possession, then he drove in, scored in the lane. That was his 13th point of the first half. So really culminated a nice half for Hartman. And that put Indiana up 33-26. So they had a 7-point lead again. And obviously, Wisconsin continued to score during that stretch. So it was 28-24 when that stretch started. And if Hartman hadn't scored those 5 points, Wisconsin would have been ahead. But Hartman did score. That allowed Indiana to keep the lead at the end of the first half. And at the time, I thought that was going to be really important, because I thought if Wisconsin had come all the way back, taken the lead at the end of the first half, now maybe you go into the locker room and you hang your heads a little bit because you played so well, but you don't have the lead. But Indiana did go into halftime with the lead, but for whatever reason, they came back and obviously didn't play well in the second half. But at least there for a brief moment in the first half, it looked like the Hoosiers were in good position to finally do some damage in the Kohl Center, and Collin Hartman had a lot to do with it, and really, played obviously one of his best games of the year, and really did a good job for most of the game, and that was the high moment for him. So hat tip to Collin Hartman in a game where there were few hat tips to give out on the Indiana side. And our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based t-shirt and apparel company that is by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. If you're looking for reasons to check out Hoosier Proud, let me give you a few. The first is obviously their designs. As we've been telling you about, you can get our official Assembly Call t-shirts there. You can also get officially licensed IU gear, and they have some cool basketball-themed shirts, some cool football-themed shirts. And then obviously they've got all of the original designs that made them famous. They've got some cool Indiana high school designs if you want to support some Indiana high schools. So go there, go to HoosierProud.com, check out the wide variety of designs that they have. I'm sure if you have any kind of connection to the Hoosier State, you'll find something that you like. The second reason to go there is their philanthropy. They support Indiana-based charities. So when you buy T-shirts, a portion of those proceeds, that revenue will go to support Indiana-based charities. And because you're an Assembly Call listener, the third reason is our friends at Hoosier Proud are very generous to you, and they give you 15% off your entire order. That's anything, the Assembly Call shirts, any of the other shirts, the mugs, anything that you get there. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, and you will get 15% off your entire order. Again, the website is HoosierProud.com. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. Let's start with Andy and get your bottoms line brought to us by IUstore.shop.
This was actually the midway point of the season. 15 games down, 15 to go, and I'm not going to declare the season over in large part so I can keep myself engaged for the last 15 post game shows that we have. But I think it's clear who this team
We've
is.
got 15 of these left. Oh
yeah.
God.
Yeah. I had somebody say,
I love my job.
I had somebody tweet at me to say, I haven't looked forward to a season ending this much since last season. So maybe that's a good way to put it. I don't know.
Things are going well. Things are going well.
But I mean, look, if ever there was any doubt, we know who this team is. This is the team that, laid an egg against Fort Wayne in a game they should have been up for because of what happened last year and because of how well they had played the game before. This is a team that walked into a place they have had no success whatsoever recently, and everything was there to be able to get a win. You've got a depleted Wisconsin team. They lose another guard in practice today. They're playing outside of Hap. Probably 75 to 80% of the other guys that played were freshmen or walk-ons. And this is a veteran team. And you wouldn't have known it by watching these guys play. You wouldn't have known it by the effort. You wouldn't have known it by the body language. You wouldn't have known it by just the general enthusiasm that was played with. And you wouldn't have known it by the poise and the knowledge of what they needed to do to play well in the game. So I don't. There's no other way to say it. That's who this team is. What they do from here, I have no idea. But they were outclassed and outplayed tonight by a team that should never have happened against. Maybe they don't win the game. That to me, while disappointing, isn't the biggest disappointment that I take away from this. It was really how they played under the circumstances, and again, just showed. Archie called him soft pretty early, and I think it's pretty hard to say that there's been any growth in that particular area from that point in the season, which I think was after the first game to where we are today, halfway through it.
All right, let's go over to Ryan and get his rant. Obviously, plenty to choose from, Ryan, and Ryan's rant is always brought to us by thebiglead.com.
During the game, I jokingly said someone should have put Robert Johnson's jump shot on a milk carton a few months ago because we haven't found it. Well, it's milk carton time here for a few people. And I'm just going to list the guys that are not showing up, that have disappeared, and that aren't holding up their end of the bargain. Robert Johnson, I think it's fair to say he has completely disappeared. Yeah, he had 14 points tonight, but did you really feel like he was driving the action or he was playing like a senior leader? No. Josh Newkirk, I think Josh Newkirk plays hard. I think it may be a skill level thing with him. He's just not up to being a starting guard at Indiana, which is sad because I think he works hard. Deron Davis, what has happened to that guy? I mean, how many times can you have the ball under the basket by yourself and miss a layup before you realize, I know he's got a shoulder problem. He's got a shoulder problem. He shouldn't be playing.
I was going to say, is he hurt? I mean, he looks hurt. He's had the groin thing.
That's the rumor. And if he is hurt, he should not be playing. And they should work on getting him better because sending him out there when he's hurt doesn't help anything. I realize that Indiana doesn't have a ton of other guys through, but you know what? Throw Clifton Moore out there. At least he'll get some experience. I mean, and that'll help later on. But if Deron is not going to show up, is going to provide you 10 minutes, a -7, which I know plus minus not the greatest thing in the world, but get you 3 rebounds and 2 points. And those rebounds, all 3 were offensive, and he wasn't able to score other than one other time. I mean, Al Durham, he's a freshman. I realize he's having growing pains. He played 20 minutes tonight, and I swear I didn't hear his name called more than once. Justin Smith, I know he's just not playing much. He only got 3 minutes. Freddie McSwain, 12 minutes, didn't score. Devonte Green, 10 minutes, didn't score. Had an assist and 2 turnovers. I mean, where are those guys? Those are guys you need. And those are guys that need to be better. And they just did not show up. Collin Hartman and Juwan Morgan, 18 points and 17 points, played relatively well. But you know what? Those guys also allowed Ethan Happ to grab 6 offensive rebounds along with Freddie McSwain and Deron Davis when they were in there. They allowed 13 Wisconsin offensive rebounds. That's not how you win games. And that is not how you can go on the road in the Big Ten and come up with a win. As far as Indiana's defense goes, I think for the most part, Indiana's defense is fine. It looks much improved over last year. Even when they lose, they're playing better. The offensive rebounds were what killed them tonight, in my opinion. And then they sent Wisconsin to the free throw line 24 times. But for the most part, the defense was better and is better. That's not the problem. The problem is the effort offensively and just the ability of anybody to step up and take command and take ownership of the team. I mean, we're sitting here begging for somebody to take some dang shots. Last year they couldn't take enough shots, but take a shot, drive into the lane, actually do something. And so, yeah, I'm putting all those guys on a milk carton right now because they're not living up to their. I want them back. I want to know, all those guys have shown they can do stuff and that they can play at this level, but they're not doing it consistently, and it's frustrating as a fan. It's frustrating as an analyst because I want to analyze a good team, and this is not a good team right now. And it's even more frustrating as somebody who has seen what these guys can do, and just watched that second half where they completely just rolled over and laid an egg and let Wisconsin do whatever they wanted, and only scoring 61 points as a men's college basketball team is embarrassing, and they should be embarrassed. And if those guys aren't going to show up, Archie Miller has plenty of guys on the bench who want to play, and he should just put them in. Just start them. I don't care. Send a message to these guys, because I realize there's not much on the bench right now that you would think, oh, that's a starting level Big Ten player. Give him a shot, because it's not going to be worse than what we just saw in the second half there.
If Archie ever does get this thing turned around and we start beating Wisconsin, what are we going to do without the vintage rants that these losses to Wisconsin always bring out in Ryan?
Come on, dude. I'll find something to yell about. I mean, I'll just not eat for like a couple hours beforehand. I'll be angry. It's fine.
I'm just trying to find the positives, and there aren't a lot. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU post-game show. We're obviously frustrated and disappointed at what we saw tonight as Indiana loses again in the Kohl Center, 71-61. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms breaking this down. So we're going to obviously talk more about the individual players and talk about some moments and talk about some stats. I want to hit something with you guys. I get this a lot on Twitter whenever we have games like this, and people start asking, okay, how much of this is on the coaching? I think a lot of people want to be patient with Archie, and they understand that these are not his handpicked players. And in a lot of ways, these players are basically just showing this year what they showed last year. We saw this team be so up and down and have some inexplicable performances, and a lot of these players are the same. But I think people hoped that maybe it would turn around and that maybe Archie had, kind of some of that special sauce to get these guys going. And to see another performance like this, I will say this, and then I want to get your guys' thoughts. I am not panicking about that. I feel like we still have kind of a disconnect between a coach and how he wants guys to play, and a roster of guys, obviously, that he didn't recruit, that he hasn't worked with, that learned how to be leaders under a different regime. And so one thing that we learned about Archie coming in is you studied what his teams did at Dayton. They were known for playing tough and playing physical. And so I don't think all of a sudden he forgot how to develop a roster and develop a team like that. And so I really think, as frustrated as these games are, and while yes, there's a strategic thing here and maybe a button Archie didn't push there that could have helped this particular game, long term, a performance like this frustrates me a lot for this year, concerns me a lot for this year, but it really doesn't change my thoughts midterm and long term about the program, because I just don't think Archie Miller Indiana teams are going to play like this once his DNA is more imprinted on this program. Am I taking too rosy of a picture with this, or how do you generally feel about that? Because I want to hit that big picture topic before we dive into the nitty gritty of this game.
Well, I'd be fine with not diving into the nitty gritty of this game if you want. Just forget it ever happened. But I think that's, it's like the family burying the car crash that happened or something and just never talking about it. No, I think that we've seen glimpses of this team playing really tough. And I'm starting to think that is all based on the effort of Archie Miller and not
being a raving lunatic, as he said.
Yeah, more that than this team actually finding something and starting to play tough. I think it's more just he's just pushing them as hard as he can to play tough, and they do play tough for him, but that's in fits and spurts, and it's not their default setting. I think Archie Miller's teams have that as their default setting and will, once he's able to sort of get the program going in his direction and everything. I agree with you that this loss frustrates me for now, but I'm not worried about long term, because I don't think he's going to have I think he's going to bring in guys who are tougher and guys who are, guys who do play the way that he wants them to play and play like he played.
Andy, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would agree. One of the things that he's talked about from a recruiting standpoint is getting guys who can't stand to lose and have that competitiveness. And there weren't a whole hell of a lot of guys out there tonight that really looked like they were mad about about the way that the game was going. It really didn't look like they felt anything about how the game was going.
And that's the most frustrating part.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to for me. It was just, I know Dockage said it during the game. I think Josh Margolis mentioned it on Twitter from being there, just kind of said the way guys looked in the huddle and whatever, just not really talking, not whatever. And so I think that's really what becomes, maybe that's just another way to say toughness or whatever you want. But I think that to me is the difference in that they just, whatever reason, these guys weren't bothered enough by how things were going. And the minute that the second half got rolling and things started to go against them, they just kind of went into a shell and they revert back to some of those old habits. I mean, there was a stretch late in the game where it was, a chance to cut the lead a couple times and they took 2 threes, which weren't bad shots. They were open, but I mean, you're not making those shots. Like, go to the rim. The guy's closing out hard at you. Go attack somebody. I mean, you continue to shoot poorly from the perimeter and you're not going to shoot yourself out of it. 1 of 7, from 3 in the second half, 26.7% for the game. You have 4 guys that scored in the second half. Wisconsin had more offensive rebounds than IU had total rebounds in the second half.
Oh my.
At some point, that's not X's and O's type stuff there. That's want to. That's Ethan Happ going between 3 guys and grabbing a rebound and putting it back in the basket.
Which is why I can't, give Collin Hartman and Juwan Morgan that much credit for the way they played tonight, because they're letting the guy cut right through them for easy rebounds offensively. And you give up a rebound to Ethan Happ that close to the basket, he's either going to put it in or he's going to get a foul call every single time. So it's just, it's almost like there's fake effort sometimes. And even from the guys you can typically rely on, and that needs to change.
Brian Tonsoni has brought that up on a couple of occasions. The fake hustle.
Well, I mentioned,
right.
I feel like the last few minutes of the game were kind of that. Like, no, I mean, he mentioned it in the context of like, oh, you make a really hard closeout at a guy that you just helped off of too far. I thought like they started to play really hard in a stretch and like really, kind of got into Hap for a couple minutes toward the end of the game. But by then it didn't matter. I just felt like there was a stretch of the game where it was like, oh, we're going to play really hard now. Well, the fact that you're playing really hard now doesn't matter. So that was, I thought there was like minutes worth of fake hustle at the end of the game to try to like, make it look. But at that point, where was that earlier when the game was still in doubt?
I see the people in the YouTube chat are talking about all the incoming recruits we have coming in next year here after the 3rd game of Big Ten play. So
that's what we're at, man.
That's where we're at right now. Just one final note on the Archie topic, and then obviously we'll move on. But Greg Gard said something to him after the game in the handshake line. It was a nice warm handshake between the two. And you could see, like from the angle that they were showing on TV, you could see Archie's face, and he looked up and said, "Thanks, I appreciate that." And I'm wondering what that could have been after this. And I'm wondering if it was something like Greg Gard saying, look, at your roster, these guys don't make sense to me either. Better times are ahead. Because I can't really think of what else he might have said to Archie after this game.
I assume he said something like, you'll get it figured out or something like that. I mean, that seems to be what coaches tend to say. But
Probably. Probably. All right. Well, coming up on the Assembly Call, I will point out tonight's meaningful moments that you might have missed. And we'll go inside the numbers. They're not going to be pretty. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's 71-61 loss to Wisconsin tonight at the Kohl Center. A dispiriting effort by the Hoosiers that really, on the one hand, it's inexplicable because you wonder how, especially after playing pretty well in the first half and having a lead, they can come out and play so poorly in the second half. And yet, on the other hand, it's not all that surprising, I guess, in a way, just because we've seen that from this team before. And it's just, it's confounding how this team can't seem to find any level of consistency other than they are inconsistent. But let's break down a few moments that you might have missed, because I think there were a couple of pivotal moments when the game was kind of in the balance, before it got out of hand and Wisconsin was just kind of nursing an 8, 9, 10-point lead there at the end. But I thought there was the play at the end of the first half, and look, we're probably not going to talk about it much in this game, but there were several terrible, normal Kohl Center variety calls. I thought, some of the fouls early on Deron Davis and Juwan Morgan were pretty ticky-tack. I don't think in any way they contributed to the loss because I think Indiana just didn't come ready to play in the second half. But I do think the play at the very end of the first half, Freddie McSwain hustles, gets an offensive rebound and scores, and they called an offensive foul, and he barely touched Ethan Happ, if he touched him at all, as they showed on the replay. And so it goes. He didn't. Yeah, I know. It went the other way. Hap makes a free throw. So instead of Indiana going in at halftime up 35-29, and 6 points felt about like what Indiana should be up based on how they had played in the first half, instead it's 33-30, and it's just kind of a little knock against the momentum. Now, look, if Indiana is such a mentally fragile team that one play could totally derail them for the second half, then we have bigger problems. But I just thought that stunk. To see, I thought Indiana deserved to go in up a little bit more. I thought that was a really nice play by Freddie, and I thought they got screwed by a phantom call. So that right there, I thought was a meaningful moment there at the end of the first half. And then I think basically the play where the game turned in the second half, it was 46-45. Wisconsin was ahead. They'd been going back and forth. Wisconsin kind of jumped out. They gained the lead, but then it was going back and forth. And Collin Hartman had just drained a three-pointer out of the timeout. I think it was the next possession, a bit of a heat check three. He rises up, shoots a three, and it is down and out. It rattles out. If he makes that three, it would have been 48-46, Indiana up 2. Instead, it goes the other way. Wisconsin drains a three. It's 49-45. Then Freddie McSwain gets blocked on the next possession. It's 51-45 with 12 minutes to go. And I don't think Indiana got any closer. I think they might have, kept it at 6 for a little while, but they didn't get any closer. And look, if that shot goes in, maybe it just delays the inevitable. But I really thought that swing right there, basically a 6-point swing in Wisconsin's favor, was really a big moment there in the second half that Indiana obviously proved unable to recover from. Andy, anything else jump out to you? Obviously in the second half, just when you look at what Wisconsin did, Indiana's up 3 at halftime. Wisconsin wins the first segment 6-5. They win the second segment of the second half 14-9, then 7-3, then 4-2, then 9-6. I mean, they just kept, it was kind of systematic how they just kept pushing the lead out. And there was never really a time in the second half, like a 3 or 4 minute stretch where Indiana kind of shook the game by the collar and said, no, we're going to get back into this, which I think you've kind of alluded to was the most disappointing thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there was a stretch in this might have been around the Hartman thing that you talked about, but, Hap goes out with about, looking at it now, 17-18 left. Wisconsin's up 2. He's out for a good 3 minutes. I think came back in with about 14 or 13:50. So, about 3.5 minutes. And they basically played even during that stretch. I mean, there was a chance. I think that was right before that stretch you talked about, actually. A chance to, given who Wisconsin was playing, who had, really been able to do much of anything at that point, and IU just couldn't dig in and kind of reclaim the lead during that point. The net effect of that was, they played 7-7. I think the commentator brought that up. The play-by-play guy brought that up when they came back out of that timeout when Hap was back on the floor. And if they couldn't really cut into things when he was gone, based on how he was playing and how IU was struggling to defend him, it just felt like there was no way. Like, that's when you have to make some hay in the game. They weren't able to do it. Davison is a guy who's got his, he's like, I kind of told you and Alex on podcast on the brink, his shoulders coming out, whatever. Like, make the guy drive to his left, not make him use his bad arm. I mean, he clearly wanted to go right every single time, and he made a bucket during that stretch and, made some plays. It's just, Aleem Ford, he's taken, over half of his shots from 3-point range. Like, that's where he's going to shoot the ball from. And so, just, things like that. Like in that stretch, Davison made a shot and Ford hit a 3 to put them back up by 2 kind of at the end of that stretch. It was just, those kinds of little things that, really allowed IU not to take advantage of Hap not being on the floor. And certainly they were bad when he was on the floor, but, that was kind of a chance to take that lead back, and they missed it.
Ryan?
Yeah. Look, if you're a bench player, if you're on Indiana and you're not playing right now, let's say you're Justin Smith or Devonte Green, or Zach McRoberts played about 28 minutes tonight. That's good, but let's consider him.
And he started.
Yeah, let's consider him in this group, though. You're not one of the scholarship guys. You're not one of the better guys. You're Al Durham too. Is another guy you can include in there. Freshman. If you're the young guys on this team, or you're the guys who aren't playing, Johnny Yeager, throw him in there. Sit after practice when everybody's gone, grab a manager and shoot for hours. Just shoot. Because right now Indiana's shooting horribly from three. There is nobody on this team you can rely on when you are down to hit a three to come back. They were 4 of 15 tonight, 26.7%. We've seen way too many games like that. The only guy who hit a three was Collin Hartman tonight. They need someone who can shoot. And if you're Justin Smith, let's say, who's only getting 3 minutes a game, get yourself a manager, have him come with you, and shoot for a few hours every day. Because you know what? Indiana needs someone who can hit a three. Work on your shot. I mean, it's truly unbelievable that a team in college basketball with this much talent can't hit threes. It just can't. I mean, wide open, nobody around you at threes. And I know a lot of that is Robert Johnson going 0 for 4. But if you can't hit threes when you're down, I mean, Indiana got down 6 points, and I thought there was no chance they could come back. Why? I mean, because the offense, they weren't doing much on offense anyway. And then when you throw in the fact that they can't, hit buckets, they can't foul a guy, and then, maybe he makes 2 free throws, but you come down, you hit a three, at least you've chipped into the lead a little bit. Like, there's nobody on this team that can do that. So if you're these guys who are sitting on the bench and you're not playing much, or you're, a non-scholarship guy and you want to earn a scholarship, start shooting. Go when you get home tonight, shoot, go back, shoot, work on your shot, get help, watch a YouTube tutorial. I don't care.
Go to San Diego, visit the shot doctor.
I've been waiting for a call all year. And Archie, I mean, come on, man. I'm here. But seriously, it's the easiest thing in the world. You can do it on your own. Practice, get better, improve, because that's one thing this team does not have, and it doesn't look like it's coming back anytime soon. Somebody needs to start hitting some jump shots, and this team, it's not looking like it's getting better. So if you're one of those guys and you want to earn some playing time, you want to be on the floor, you want all the pretty girls to see you on TV, learn how to shoot, get better, work on it, because Indiana badly needs some shooting. And, we used to always get mad when Tom Crean would say, well, we got to make shots. We see that
at some point you do have to.
Yeah, at some point you do kind of have to make shots, and Indiana has not been making shots. So that's what I would say is, if you're not playing and you want to get on the floor, start practicing and start making some shots.
But you know what? I think, though, that's also like when you look at the shot distribution, I mean, they took 15 of 50 shots from 3-point range. So only 30% of the shots from 3-point range, which for this team is not bad. But I mean, 57% of their twos, they were 20 of 35. And that continues to be a strength. And yet, when the game, they really needed to make plays in the game, they just defaulted back to like, well, I'm going to hit a big three here and get all the momentum. I'm like, well, actually, you're not, because you've proven no ability to do that over the course of the season. And so that's where I got frustrated again, that, that stretch in the, late in the game when it was like, I don't want to say it was 8 or 9. Robert Johnson took one, Hartman took one, although at least he had actually, made one, but it was opportunities to go to the basket and maybe try to get something going there, and just, missed out on it. If you're going to shoot 57% on twos, I mean, other than Hap, Wisconsin didn't have anybody that could challenge shots. I used guards when they decided they wanted to, could really get to the rim pretty easily, and yet too often kind of settling for that. Devonte, I think that's why he hardly played in the second half. He took a couple long shots when he was in the first half. Just those aren't the shots that this team needs. And if the other team's going to pack it in and make you make those shots, so be it. But tonight there was opportunities to get to the rim that they took occasionally, just not nearly enough.
Yeah, well, I agree with you that tonight should not have been a night where you shoot a bunch of threes. I completely agree. Indiana was the more talented team on the floor and should have been able to take those guys to the hoop.
And Wisconsin's 2-point defense has been extremely, almost historically bad for them. I mean, that was the weakness clearly to attack.
But you know what? At some point, as you said, that defense is going to collapse, and you need to be able to hit something. And Indiana just is not right now, and somebody needs to step up and be that guy. Yeah. Even if it's just one guy.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips, breaking down Indiana's 71-61 loss to Wisconsin. Guys, let's go inside the numbers. And we've talked about a few numbers here already. Obviously, the shooting numbers not good for Indiana. One shooting number on the positive side that was decent was Indiana made 9 out of 10 from the free throw line. So from a percentage basis, that was nice. But the fact that they only shot 10 free throws while taking 50 field goal attempts, that is a terrible free throw rate. And obviously, Wisconsin goes 18 of 24 from the line. So that advantage from the line, Wisconsin made 18, Indiana made 9. That's obviously a big difference right there. And you kind of expect that in the Kohl Center, obviously. But the other place where Wisconsin really made hay, and Andy, you mentioned this earlier, is Wisconsin grabbed 13 offensive rebounds, and they beat Indiana in terms of second chance points 15-4. And Indiana has been a team that has really relied on second chance points. You think about how many times Zach McRoberts has gotten his hand on an offensive rebound, saved a possession, and it's turned into points. Or Freddie McSwain has done that. And obviously we talked about one instance where McSwain did that, but it got waved off because of a bad foul call. But still, Wisconsin on so many occasions, especially in the second half, where maybe Indiana got it to 8 or 9 points and they needed to stop. One play in particular where Ethan Happ got his own rebound, and scored, those second chance points really killed Indiana. So, to me, what happened at the free throw line, what happened in second chance points, really kind of tells the story for why Wisconsin ended up winning this one by 10. Andy, what else jumped out to you on the stat sheet?
I mean, those were the big ones. The other one is, the assist numbers. Wisconsin had 12 assists. They had more turnovers than assists as well. They had 15 turnovers, 12 assists, but 12 assists on 23 made field goals. So over half of their made field goals, they had an assist on. IU made one more field goal in the game and only had 9 assists. 5 of those came from Robert Johnson, and it just ultimately speaks to how stagnant the offense was, and just really unable to create things for other people. And that was a big one. I think it was the Youngstown State game where they, had a ton of assists in the second half. Now, obviously, Youngstown State different than Wisconsin, but just the ball movement and the overall offensive execution is just not good enough. And I think you need look no further than, 9 assists to, I guess for IU only 12 turnovers is not that bad, even though it was a fairly low possession game. But 9 assists, this team needs to create, they don't have guys that are creating their shots one-on-one. They don't have guys who are just going to pull up and make threes, as we talked about. So they've got to do that with ball movement, and they didn't do it tonight. And Wisconsin did, a better job of that, either through Happ, who led them in assists, but, a number of different guys had, at least 2 assists, and IU had, one player that had more than one.
And the other numbers that jump out, obviously, are what Ethan Happ did. I mean, he is clearly the go-to guy. You knew he was going to get the ball, and he ends up scoring 28 points. He grabs 9 rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds, had 4 assists, had 4 steals, had 2 block shots. We joke a lot about Ethan Happ because obviously he gets lots of calls, and certainly in the first half, it felt like anytime Indiana breathed too close to Ethan Happ, a foul was called. And we know about the traveling, but I think you also have to tip your cap because the guy did make a lot of good plays. Ryan's over here rolling his eyes. Is he a senior? Are we going to be done with him after this year? Because I would really like to not see any more Ethan Happ games because he kills us.
I don't actually know. I thought he was a junior, but I could be wrong.
No, I think he is only a junior.
Yeah, I think he is a junior.
Oh boy! All right.
But no, what I'll say about Ethan Happ, he's an extremely good player. There's no question. Yeah, he's a junior, by the way. He's an extremely good player. I've never
go pro, Ethan. Go pro.
I've never argued otherwise. That's the problem, I think, is that he's a good player and he gets a ton of help that he doesn't need. I mean, he's a very good player.
It's basically your same argument against Coach K. It's the same thing with Ethan Happ.
No, I don't think Coach K is a good coach. There's a difference.
That's true.
Remember?
That's right. Go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah. No, Happ is a very good player. There's no question about that. My problem is that he gets a ton of help that he doesn't need. Like, I'm sorry, he switches his pivot foot every time he gets the dang ball. Like, people were posting GIFs of it tonight. I mean, and then you breathe on him and it's a foul. And look, if I were Ethan Happ, I'd take advantage of all of that too. It's not his fault.
Someone said in the chat, just think if Happ played for Duke.
Oh God. I think the world would actually collapse on itself. And I would certainly quite possibly be dead at this point from the yelling. But yeah, oh man. He's he's a good player. There's no question about it. Very good player. And I'm sure Wisconsin fans love him for his traveling and softness on fouls. But other than that, he also flops a lot, which I didn't ever notice until tonight. So
all right. Well, we had to get a vintage Ryan rant in on Ethan Happ, so I just wanted to open that up. Plus,
good for you, Ethan. You keep doing you, son.
It allows us to not have to talk about the gory details of this game, but we will continue doing that here on the Assembly Call. Plenty of other storylines that we need to hit, players that we need to analyze, and so we will do that coming up here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game and every Thursday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also view all of our live broadcasts right on our homepage at assemblycall.com. So whatever's easier for you. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, breaking down Indiana's second loss in Big Ten play as the Hoosiers lose 71-61 to Wisconsin in the Kohl Center, extending. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds like hyperbole when you say, like, man, last time Indiana won the Kohl Center was when, Luke Recker and AJ Guyton were playing. It sounds like, names that you would just pull out of a hat to suggest that it's been a while. But that's literally how long it's been, which is absolutely insane. And that has to end at some point. It felt like tonight would be a good night for it to happen, but Indiana just didn't show up in the second half, which was extremely disappointing, as we have talked about ad nauseum here on the show already. Let's talk about some individuals. And Ryan, you brought up Devonte Green. I thought, he only plays 10 minutes. That I don't know if that's a low for him, but it's got to be pretty far down there, and really just didn't do anything. I mean, he had a couple of turnovers, some bad shots. And he's been a guy that, against better competition this year, has played better and has had some important moments in some of the better performances Indiana's had. And I thought it was going to be important for him to kind of step up and play well tonight, and that he might have that opportunity with Wisconsin going so deep into their guards, in terms of the depth because of the injuries that they've had. And he was terrible, and Archie just didn't seem to have any patience with him at all tonight. What do you make of this performance in particular from Devonte? And you've probably been higher on him than anybody. What are we to expect from him moving forward? Maybe an impossible question.
I thought he would have developed more by now. And especially with the trajectory that we saw last year through the beginning of this year, I thought that he was, destined to be one of the better players on this team, especially more reliable because of his toughness, because of his defensive intensity and his ability to shoot the ball at times. But he's been a flop over the last few games and over the last, stretch. I just don't feel like he's playing very well. And, I'm with Archie. I didn't have much patience for Devonte tonight either. So I'm not surprised that he didn't play very much. I just see a guy who's out of sorts, who's disjointed. Again, 2 turnovers, 1 assist. He's got to be a guy that makes the offense more dynamic when he's in there, or there's no, why is he in there? I mean, I know he plays good defense, but you've got to be able to add something offensively and make something happen. And he's one of those guys who's sort of the straw that stirs the drink when he's on, and he needs to be that guy, and he needs to have more confidence in himself. And that seems like a weird thing to say because he's a guy who oozes confidence. But it seemed like tonight the game was just beyond him. It was just over his head, and that's not something you ever say about Devonte Green. He thinks he's, able to run with anybody, and he should be able to. So, I don't know. I think that he's a guy who has a lot of room to grow, but he's got to start actually growing.
Andy, let's talk about Zach McRoberts, and we'll get to Deron Davis too, because I think we need to talk about him. But, Zach played 28 minutes tonight. He got the start, and obviously his performances over the last few weeks have just been great, and he's steadily gotten more time, and he's produced. And we saw in those games against Tennessee Tech and Youngstown State a bit more offense coming out, and he made some 3-pointers. And we thought, okay, maybe this is a guy who could provide some of that outside shooting. Well, he gets his first start, plays 28 minutes, no points, only gets 2 rebounds, none of them offensive. And that's been where the majority of his contributions have really come. And he picked up 3 personal fouls, and those were the only contributions he made to the stat sheet. And you saw in one possession, I think Dockich pointed it out late in the game, where 2 Wisconsin guys were all over McRoberts. I mean, not letting him get anywhere near an offensive rebound. And so, was this a case, do you think, of McRoberts actually showing up on scouting reports now and people kind of looking out for him and saying, look, this guy's going to fly in and try and get offensive rebounds. We got to not let him do this because it's a big part of what Indiana wants to do. And maybe we saw a little bit of Zach's limitations tonight, and now he's going to have to kind of adjust back a little bit. Or maybe it's the podcast on the Brink jinx because we had him on for an interview. I don't know.
Could certainly be that.
I'm blaming you, Jared.
Well, we had Andy on for an interview too, and he's done fine tonight. So
no, he's been off, man. He is
so far. I'm about to come unhinged here in a couple of minutes, so we're not done yet. We don't know. No, I think I think there's a little bit of that. I mean, if you look at the stats, though, I mean, Wisconsin came in. I don't know what they were before the game, but after the game, they're 32nd in the country as of right now in defensive rebounding percentage. So that's an area where they've done well over the course of the season, keeping guys off the glass. And obviously, I'm sure they knew that about him, and being able to try to do that. He really just didn't even take shots. And if it wasn't for the fouls in the second half, I mean, he had 11 minutes. He would have had, as Mark Titus would say, he would have had an 11 trillion had he not fouled 3 times in the second half. I mean, that's just tough to do. And I think that was where, he was a guy that we've talked about being able to impact the game without scoring. So I don't think the fact that he didn't score was problematic, but just not being able to, make some of those other plays as well. And I actually was a little bit surprised when you look after the game about how much he ended up playing, because I didn't feel as though he really played all that much.
You didn't notice him at all, really.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he played 17 minutes in the first half is astounding to me as I look at that.
Which is strange, because I feel like you always notice Zach, because he's out there doing Zach McRoberts thing. So
a lot of times you say, "Hey, is that Collin Hartman?" No, it's Zach McRoberts. Yeah.
So, I mean, did he? So, do you think? I guess that's what I mean. Like, was he still out there to at least as you observed it, playing with the same energy, playing with the same effort? Did he get caught up in whatever malaise kind of caught the rest of the guys? Like, I don't know.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. One of the things with a guy like that, and I think we brought this up with other players. I think we've talked about this with Devonte at times. Is are some guys just better to not start the game on the floor, get a feel for how things are going, and then be able to come in and really inject that energy? And it may be it's a 1-game sample size. Who really knows? But it could be that is Zach just a guy who could really come in and kind of give that injection of energy off the bench, and how does that really play with him in the starting lineup? Now, the flip side of that is, when you go back and look down this game, I mean, it's kind of like Ryan was saying earlier, like you're looking down and trying to figure out like who you'd really put in. Doc had mentioned the same thing after the game. Like, I'd go find these guys to start. Well, based on what you saw tonight, like, who in the world are you playing? So I think that becomes a little bit hard if you want to take him out and say, well, maybe he's best suited to come off the bench. Well, then who takes that spot in the starting lineup? But it'll be interesting to see. I'm not ready to, kind of declare that not a role that he's ready for or should be playing at this point. Yeah. But I think it's something to watch as we go forward. If he starts again against Minnesota and you see some of the same thing, is he just become a guy who is better suited to come off the bench? And that may turn out to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, he's in a new role. It is, I guess, somewhat expected that he might struggle in that role. But, I just suppose we've come to trust him as a guy who is able to produce more than he did tonight. So that was disappointing. I want to talk about Juwan a little bit too, because he does end up finishing with 17 points. Got a lot of those late, where it was just Indiana needed something and nothing was happening offensively, and they went to Juwan and he just kind of took it and tried to do his best. Did have 4 fouls, also had 4 turnovers. Obviously, the foul trouble killed him. Let me say this: here's an issue that I do have with Archie. I don't like how if a guy gets 2 fouls in the first half, they're just done for the rest of the half. And I get, the philosophy there. You want to make sure that you get that guy to the second half without the third foul. Well, but Green wasn't like that. That was one of the things I liked about Green. But
yeah, but whenever he got the third foul, we always ripped him for it.
I didn't. Oh, no, I did not. I did not, because look, that's the risk that you
got to go find the tape.
And it's go look for the tape, because it didn't happen. It did not happen. But that's one of those things. Duran gets those 2 early fouls. Now he's out for the whole half. And it can be tough to kind of get back into the rhythm a little bit, and I feel like when you have so few players who are good and can be productive, playing for that long a stretch without him out there, I understand the reasoning why you do it. I just don't like it, especially when it's early fouls like that. Now a guy's got to sit for that long. I mean, Juwan only plays 22 minutes and he didn't foul out of the game. Like, he finished with 4 fouls. So how many more minutes could he have played? Maybe he fouls out in the last minute or two, but how many more minutes could he have played? I don't like to manage my minutes that way. So, I mean, do you guys agree with that, or am I off base there? Because I feel like you foul out your guys a little bit more than they might actually foul out themselves when you manage it like that.
I mean, it felt like the challenge for him at that point was, to me, it was a case of if you played him, then you got to take him off. You can't let him guard Hap at that point. But I think you could roll the dice and let him guard anybody else on Wisconsin at that point, and
because you need his offense. I mean,
yeah. and I think it was a game because of Wisconsin's personnel, because they had so few guards. They did play a little bit bigger lineup than probably they they would normally have under other circumstances. But I think that could have let IU play, where they haven't been able to play, kind of a big guy plus Morgan plus Hartman in many games. Those are some of the lineup questions that I got. Like Davis, Hartman, and Morgan, I think coming into the game had never played together over the course of this season. And so you couldn't really do that. But I think it was in tonight's game, you could have seen that where, they played McSwain a ton in the first half, trying to, just almost give fouls against Hap, quite honestly, as somebody in there. And you may have been able to get away with, okay, you can play him and Morgan and Hartman together and have a somewhat effective, lineup that was out there, because none of the guards were really playing all that well at that point either. So I thought there was some opportunity to do that. It's just a matter of, does Wisconsin go and try to get him in situations where he switched on to Hap and those kinds of things, which is a risk you're willing to take. But in normal half-court setting, let him guard literally anybody else that Wisconsin has and take your chances on that end, because you do need the offense.
Yeah. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, breaking down Indiana's 71-61 loss. I just want you all to know, if it were up to Ryan, the show would be over right now. We'd be done.
I just want to be banging my head into the wall with this game. I mean, no, it's just there's just nothing left to say. I mean, as long as this team plays with that level of malaise, they're not going to win games. And it's
rubbed off on Ryan, and he just wants to give up on the show.
Yeah, yeah. This is what happens.
Where's your competitive fire?
It's
we are not going to quit in the second half.
It's 6:50 out here. I've got other stuff I'd love to be doing than talking about how awful this team is right now. No, I'm kidding, but it's it's just depressing watching this team play like that. It just is, and we've seen it before at the Kohl Center, but tonight felt different. It felt like in the second half, as things went along, as soon as Wisconsin got a more than a 1-score lead, they just kind of were like, okay, well, we're going to lose, so let's just pack it in. And again, a lot of that fake hustle, fake, effort was clearly on display. And, I'm just, it's not a team that's not something I'm excited to discuss. And I'm fine with the loss. I'm not fine with the loss of complete and utter just mailing it in. When you have a chance to play basketball for Indiana, and you're just going to mail it in like that. I don't respect that, and I don't want to watch that.
I mean, I think that's a totally fair point to make. Does anybody have anything on Deron Davis? I know I mentioned that we would talk about him, and
I mentioned in the open. I
guess it's hard to know what to say, because, like you said, if he's hurt, he shouldn't be out there. He's not running the same as he was before, and I know Dockich just absolutely went in on him, and of course, ironically, that was right before Deron made a couple of nice hustle plays. My wife, by the way, while watching the game, looked up at one point. She's like, "Who are these announcers? I can't stand listening to this," just because they're being so negative about Indiana.
Dan Dockich, big fan of the show.
But I mean, obviously Indiana needs more out of him. I mean, any, calculus of how this team was going to compete in the Big Ten or finish in the top half or win games had Deron Davis playing at, an honorable mention all Big Ten level. I mean, I don't think Indiana can compete and win games without that happening. And he's not anywhere close to that. I mean, this is 5, 6, 7 games in a row where he hasn't been in double figures and has really been struggling. And Archie's, comments after the Youngstown State game, I mean, he basically called Deron out for saying that he's playing the way that he's practicing. So, I don't know where we go from here with Deron, but he's a guy said at the start of the year, responsibility for production. Juwan's got it. Robert Johnson's got it. He's got it. Those 3 guys have to bring it every game. And while we can, certainly quibble with what Robert Johnson did and what Juwan Morgan did in this game, they were far from perfect. They did produce, like they put some numbers up. And at some point, you just got to put some numbers up. And right now, Deron's not even putting numbers up. Andy, you haven't really talked about him much today. Maybe you have a different angle on this.
No, I mean, you look at the minutes played the last 10 games, he's played over 20 minutes twice. And even those were 21 minutes and 23 minutes. So I think what we've seen of Archie is that he's going to play guys he thinks give him a chance to win that are going to play hard. So you can read into that however you want. And, I feel like we tried to explain away things early in the season. Oh, this isn't a good matchup. This wasn't a good matchup. We've talked about that as well of, at some point he needs to be the mismatch. And this was a team that he had success against last year. And just, immediately kind of took himself out of the game. We had one foul within the first 30 seconds of the game. And, some of his struggles defensively where he continued to be insistent on coming out and trying to guard Hap 18 feet from the basket. I swear there was some stat coming into last year where Hap hadn't even made a shot in his career that was outside of the lane and had attempted very few. Just why you want to go out there when you know, lateral quickness defensively is not an area of strength for you as a basketball player. Why you're going to go challenge a guy? I'd make him make 5 shots from 18 feet, before he really went out on him, because then, Hap would just drive around him every single time that he was there. And so it eventually became a scenario where, he wasn't getting the ball, he struggled to finish around the rim, and he couldn't guard anybody. So how are you going to play him? But, I think that's been the biggest part, is that he has been a liability defensively, and he hasn't been able to offset that by really being a positive, consistent contributor offensively when he gets the ball inside. So at that point, I struggle to figure out how you're going to, how he's going to play a ton of minutes in those scenarios when he's just matchup wise, not really giving you a whole lot at this point.
Yeah, look, here's my thing on De'Ron Davis. He'll be as good as he wants to be. If he wants to be an all Big Ten type basketball player, he's going to make himself into an all Big Ten type basketball player. If he doesn't, and he doesn't care, he won't. It's all about him right now, and drive, finding the drive. And he found it this offseason to get into shape. He needs to find that drive to work on his game, to get better and be more focused.
He's had it in games this year, and he's improved.
Sure.
In terms of his efficiency. So skill-wise, he's gotten better, but these last 5-6 games, it's been all downhill.
And clearly he has the ability to prove himself when he's challenged. And look at the Duke game. He was the best player on the floor for sections of that Duke game. But it's a matter of focus, concentration, and working hard. And if he's not practicing hard, Archie's right to call him out. So that's my thing on it. That guy is talented. We saw what he did as a high school player in Colorado, became one of the greatest high school players in Colorado's ever had, to win 2 Mr. Basketballs and just dominate the state championship and all that stuff. He can be a very good basketball player, but it's on him to decide if that's what he wants and to take it upon himself to make himself better.
Yep. All right, coming up on our final segment of this edition of the Assembly Call, we hand out our game balls, we look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, and then we deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's 71-61 loss to Wisconsin. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are wrapping up our disappointed breakdown of Indiana's 71-61 loss to Wisconsin in the Kohl Center. Gentlemen, handing out game balls, never quite as fun in a loss, especially kind of a dispiriting loss like this. But it's here on the run sheet, and that means that we are obligated to do it. So let's hand out some game balls. And there's 3 of us, so we're really going to have to go deep in this one. Let's see. We'll go with Andy first. So we'll give you the opportunity to grab Collin Hartman.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not above taking that opportunity, so I'm going to go with Collin Hartman. No, in all seriousness, I thought he played really well off the bench. Made some big shots in the first half. Was the only guy to hit a 3. Led the team with 18 points and tied for the team lead with 4 rebounds, which I guess is somewhat telling as well. But I thought he, really gave them a spark and had kind of become the guy that, I think everybody expected him to be a little bit. I was listening to the latest Mind Your Banners with Zach Osterman and Chronic Hoosier, and they kind of talked a little bit about McRoberts, and in the same breath said a little bit that Hartman hadn't really done as many things as people kind of expected as he was getting back, and they wondered whether that was still him just getting healthy and those kinds of things. So I think this is a positive sign for him, certainly tonight. But yeah, he had 13 of those 18 in the first half, all 4 of the rebounds in the first half. So certainly production wise, that dipped a bit in the second half. But I thought he really helped IU build a lead, particularly given the foul trouble that De'Ron and Juwan had in the first half. That he ended up having to play a lot of minutes and really responded well in that first half.
And I guess, again, as we desperately search for positives from this game, you look at what Collin Hartman did. He played 32 minutes. I've got to think that's the most minutes he's played in a game this year. Maybe that's a sign that he's, a little bit more healthy. I know people have kind of wondered maybe, is he really at full strength? He was active tonight, played a lot of minutes, looked like he had good lift on his jump shot. Maybe, is it possible that what we saw from him tonight, maybe we'll see a little bit more moving forward? Obviously it could just be an aberration, but perhaps that's one big positive that could come from this game is if Hartman can be out there playing more minutes. We know that Indiana's lineups with him on the court, and tonight they were as well. I think Indiana was positive plus minus with him on the court tonight. Let me look it up real quick. I don't want to
minus. I think he was minus. Yeah, he was. He was the only. He
Minus,
was plus 2.
No, he was plus 2.
Oh, okay. I have a -3 on mine, but okay.
Well, either way, he was right around there. I mean, the point being, Indiana, even if he hasn't produced a ton, Indiana has played better with him on the floor. Ryan's hypothesis there is it's because Dad's out there and no one wants to disappoint Dad, which I think is pretty good.
It's my story and it's hypothesis.
But more importantly, Ryan, you said Indiana needs a shooter, and I don't know if Collin Hartman has ever been quite the 3-point shooter that his reputation has been like the people think he is, but he's a guy who can knock down 38, 39%, 40%, when he's really cooking. And so for him to go 4 for 8 tonight, maybe that's a positive you can get from this game is him being able to play more minutes, longer stretches, be able to shoot, because Indiana desperately needs it. So obviously, I'm filibustering here, lingering on Collin Hartman because I need to now make a game ball choice. And actually, it's pretty easy. I mean, it goes to Juwan Morgan, and I don't think it was a great performance from Juwan Morgan. I don't want to say it's an empty 17 points, but he got a lot of those points late when the game. It felt like the game was kind of decided. But to his credit, while a lot of his teammates didn't really seem to have a lot of fight there for the final 14, 15 minutes of that second half, it did come a little bit late. You would have liked to see that fire from him a little bit early, but he was still going and trying to make something happen. Try to recapture that magic that he had in the Notre Dame game. So, and again, we can't take for granted, especially on this team, guys that go out there and produce. And so for as rough as this game might have been for Juwan, he got in the foul trouble, had the turnovers, he still had 17 points and 4 rebounds and did some other things, had some steals, had some blocks, had some nice defensive possessions. So I think he's the pretty clear second choice for a game ball tonight. And again, I think it's a good sign that he can have 17 points and 4 boards and you still feel a little bit disappointed like he left some stuff out there on the court. It's another sign of how far he's come this year as a player. And now over to Ryan for his game ball.
I'm giving it to the clock operator who sounded the final horn. That was the best part of the game for me, frankly. No, I first of all, I don't know why we all have to give them to different people. I don't know. That was never a rule that was established. So I'm giving mine to Collin Hartman.
I guess that's true.
I mean, I don't know.
It's new. We just started this year.
I mean, and the reason I'm giving it to Collin Hartman is because he played all those minutes, 32 minutes, only had 1 turnover. So that's why I'm giving it to him. The points nice, and he was the only guy to hit a 3-pointer, but he also only turned the ball over once, so wasn't making mistakes out there. I don't think anybody played great, but he certainly played the best of the guys who were out there.
Okay, very nice. All right, so I guess the next step here is let's talk about Minnesota. Obviously, this is back-to-back. We have these venues that we hate. Obviously, the Kohl Center, the barn has just been occasionally a house of horrors. Every now and then you'll have a ridiculous performance like Nick Zeisloff's 3-point shooting performance a couple of years ago in the first half that saved Indiana's bacon up there. But what's awaiting?
Any chance we can put him in a jersey and just
oh my god,
say he's somebody else on the roster?
How great would he fit
Jager
on this
looks
team?
Different, man. But we're just gonna roll with it and let him play.
So I will say we don't need to go real long here. If you want a more in-depth preview, Andy did talk about Minnesota on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink. We had Zach McRoberts on, and then Andy joined me and Alex Bozich, and we talked about Minnesota. Obviously, we previewed the Wisconsin game, so you can skip right past that stuff. But kind of quickly here, Andy, what's facing Indiana, and what are maybe outside of play with more effort and spirit in the second half, like outside of that obvious stuff, what's Indiana going to have to do to go up there and get a win?
Well, I mean, one thing is rebounding. They're currently top 30 in offensive rebounding percentage. So given what Wisconsin did to IU tonight, that's a huge concern. Jordan Murphy averaging a double-double, I think leading the nation in rebounding, one of the better offensive rebounders around. That's a big one. They've also got a high free throw rate. So again, if you think back to kind of what you talked about as the two stats that really were IU's undoing, you're facing another team who plays much faster than Wisconsin, but really excels at the 2 areas that IU was exposed tonight. So I think those are, statistically a couple areas to really pay attention to. And then obviously from a player standpoint, Murphy's going to be, a tough matchup trying to, keep him off the glass. I think he's averaging about 19 and 12, 19 and 13, something like that. So that'll be, it'd be a big one. Nate Mason sounds like is a game time decision I heard for their game on Wednesday against Illinois. So Sounds like he's close to coming back, so I would assume he'll be in the lineup, and they'll be at full strength really for the first time in a few weeks with both he and Dupree McBrayer back. So, a lot of talented guys. They don't shoot a ton of threes. Do have some guys that shoot it well, but they really are a team that really likes to pound it inside and shoot pretty well. From three on the occasion that they take it. At least they've got a couple guys who have shot well so far this season.
I think Nate Mason should take the week off. Make sure that he's fully healthy. No need for him to rush it back.
Yeah, I agree. He's only shooting 39% on 2-pointers, though, and 44% on threes. So, go figure on that one. But
all right, you're listening to the Assembly Call IU post-game show. We're clearly doing anything that we can to avoid having to break down more of this game. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts, or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout, ASSEMBLY, and you will get 15% off your entire order. Again, that is HoosierProud.com, promo code ASSEMBLY. I am Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. It is time for last call. Let's tie a bow on this ugly Indiana performance. Another loss at the Kohl Center. Ryan, kick it off with you first so that you can get out of here and go enjoy the rest of your beautiful San Diego weather.
Well, based on what's going on Twitter right now, apparently we don't have to worry about playing at the barn, guys, because we may all be dead by the time that happens. Anyway, that's not a politics thing. That's just I'm looking at Twitter, and anyway. Look, this team needs to learn how to play together. It needs to learn, and these upperclassmen need to have their jobs threatened. Essentially, these guys need to. You got to have some heart and some desire. And if they're not going to display it, Archie Miller is completely justified in benching these guys. So let's hope that they learn how to play with effort, intensity, and toughness. And if not, let's start playing the younger guys and build towards next season. Because at this point, if you play like this the rest of the year, there's no point to that. It's like an NFL team that doesn't make the playoffs, but just misses it. Like, what was the point of that? You're not getting a good draft pick. You're not going to improve.
Veiled Chargers reference from Ryan here.
Hey, you know what? I am so happy that's what happened this year. You have no idea. I was celebrating yesterday. But no, that's it. Like, what's the point of going 9-7 and missing the playoffs? There's no point to that. And it's kind of like this. There's no point in limping through the season with these older guys playing. Put the younger guys in if you're not going to get anything out of those other guys. So that's where I'm at with it. Those seniors need to step up. Those upperclassmen need to step up. And if they don't, time to move on.
Strong words. All right, Andy, last call.
I don't know what to say that I didn't, kind of say in the opening. I think it's just incredibly frustrating given the circumstances, given, what was at stake. I mean, this is, we continue to talk about this. This Big Ten is just wide open. If somebody wants to go and grab it, at least in the middle part of it. I mean, obviously not the title itself, but outside of those top couple teams, it's anybody could really assert themselves. And this seemed like a chance for IU to do that, going into a building where the students weren't going to be there. Again, with all the kind of roster depletion that Wisconsin's had and the way that they've played, and to really go out, particularly in the second half, and just lay an egg and not show a lot of fight is pretty disappointing. And it's the kind of thing that makes you think like, all right, well, how many games are left of this? Because this is going to be tough to watch if this is what it is. But, like I said at the beginning, you're hard pressed to walk away from this and the other games of this season and feel anything but, we know who this team is right now, and this is what it's going to be. And while there may be a few moments of glory mixed in along the way, there's going to be more of performances like this than the other way around. And I think that, it's pretty disappointing to see, a veteran group like that not take advantage of the opportunity that was there. And so it obviously leaves you feeling, even less confident that they'll be able to take any kind of opportunity against what is a much better Minnesota team on Saturday. So, for all the things that you might have looked forward to, and everybody kind of got their hopes up, like maybe this was the chance to do that. Maybe when things seem like they're at their worst, they'll bounce back and play well at Minnesota. But there are very few things that we saw tonight that suggest that's going to be the case. So it now becomes interesting to see whether there are lineup shakeups and those kinds of things. Haven't really seen any post game comments from Archie at all after the game, so somewhat curious to hear what he had to say. Although I feel like it's going to be a similar refrain to what he's had to say after a few games already this season, which to circle back is kind of what really the most disappointing part is it's the same kinds of issues and performance that we continue to talk about. Feels all too reminiscent of a number of the things that we would talk about last year.
Yeah, Ryan, your analogy to the NFL is a good one. It obviously only goes so far because in the NFL, you lose more games, you get a better draft pick. But the thought of, how are you actually building toward the future? How is what you're doing now building toward the future is so relevant. And I think that's what's so important for this team. Like the NCAA tournament seems like such a long shot. I don't think anybody's even thinking about that. The NIT right now, would Indiana be on the bubble for that? So no one's really thinking about what can this team achieve this season in terms of like wins, losses, or titles, anything like that. It's about how can what happens this year contribute to a better next year and lay the foundation that we're looking back on 4 or 5 years from now and saying, okay, that really meant something. We really got something from that. And I think the most obvious way for that to happen is for this team to win as many games as possible and create some momentum and, pull a few upsets and finish higher in the Big Ten than you think. And you start to see that scrappy, Archie Miller type team. And you kind of see that DNA and you see that start to happen. That was the first option. And I think we all had hope. You see certain games like the Notre Dame game and the performance against Duke, and you think maybe that's happening. And then tonight, and other performances that we've seen this year, that all kind of comes crashing down. And it makes you wonder, okay, Ryan, as you said, at what point is it going to be time to start taking some lumps with some of the younger guys? And you might in the short term lose more games, but maybe that's the way to get something out of the season because those guys are going to be in the future, in the program in the future. And if the older guys aren't going to contribute to wins or at least losses that you can be proud of. I mean, it's weird that, we all just wish we could have been proud of this loss tonight, and you lose and you can't even, kind of say like, oh, at least we went up there and gave a good effort. I mean, if you can't even do that, then I think you're right, Ryan. What are we doing? And so I don't think we're at that point yet. I think the season is still salvageable. You're only 3 games into Big Ten play, and we've, seen, in this program, things kind of turn around. So I think that opportunity is still there as these guys get more comfortable with the system. But man, with each passing game, it does start to seem more and more, but like maybe getting these young guys some more time is going to be the best way to salvage something from this season. So we'll just have to see. Obviously, it's going to be a big storyline moving forward. But this game tonight, a dispiriting one, a disappointing one. And if Indiana continues to play like this on the road, it's going to be very hard to pick up any road wins in the Big Ten, because I know the loss says it was to Wisconsin, and based on what Wisconsin's been the last 9-10 years, maybe even longer, that feels like, okay, well, this is, a top 4 team that we're losing to. That's not the Wisconsin Indiana played tonight. And that context is important, because if Indiana played like this against Purdue or Michigan State or maybe even in Minnesota, this could have been a 20-30 point loss. So the Hoosiers really need to figure out what went wrong tonight, fix it, and hopefully they can get that fixed or at least moving in a better direction by Saturday, and put a much better overall effort and a better ability to execute out there against Minnesota and make that a better game. All right. That'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that our live broadcasts immediately following every IU game are always available on our homepage at assemblycall.com and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can always catch up on demand anytime with our podcast. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts and you'll find us. And of course, definitely don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join and join our free email newsletter. You'll get our weekly 6-banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails that we send the morning after every game. This one won't be a particularly fun one to write, but there's always some insightful nuggets. And I always find something for those emails that we forgot to mention on the show that we just didn't have time for. So it's a good companion piece to the post-game show. So assemblycall.com/join. Make sure you get on that. All right. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again Thursday night for Assembly Call Radio, and then Saturday for IU Minnesota. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.